And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Anton Grosz, and that's Grosz with a Z. He was an atheist that had a near-death experience that completely transformed his understanding of life and death. Anton, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Well, thank you, Jeff. My pleasure to be here. And that's, by the way, Grosz.
All right.
But it's all the same, right?
Yeah. I don't think my audience would take it in the Gross way anyways.
Well, actually, that's what it was when I was born. My name was, I changed my name when my son was 12 years old, and he said, "Dad, I'm going to be a jazz musician, and I really don't want to put Gross on my album. Could you change your name?" So I did, to Grosz, and some few years later, 10 years later, found a postcard from World War I from a relative whose name was actually spelled Grosz. So it was changed back to what it had originally been. It's never you can't explain something; they just work out.
And you are an amazing father for doing that for your son.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's start at not exactly on the day you died, but at a little bit before, because I think there's a little backstory that we need to include.
Yeah, it's really quite an amazing experience. I grew up in what I call a devout atheist family. My grandfather, when I was 6 years old, he sat me on his knee and he said, "God is the sum total of man's ignorance. We used to think the sun was God. Then we learned how the sun works. Now, the sun isn't God anymore." He said, "Someday humanity's going to know how everything works, and then there'll be no more need for God at all." Now, when you're 6 years old, you believe your grandfather. You love him, and also he's the loudest and wins all the arguments around the table. So, of course, that's the way it is. And we were into science. You had to prove things. People who had faith, whatever that means, was just some silliness. And let's fast forward, I became an agnostic, by the way, when I got into college, so that I wasn't always fighting with my, religious fraternity brothers. But fast forward, I'm 37 years old. My sister's husband, a beautiful, lovely young man, he dies. And my sister finds solace and peace in Siddha Yoga. And my mother, the daughter of this fellow who sat me on, his knee, she calls me up and she has sympathy for her daughter, but she says, "Will you find out what your silly sister is doing? Why is she, have to find peace and solace through religion?" So I contacted my sister. My sister sent me a book on meditation by Baba Muktananda, the founder of Siddha Yoga. And I read it and I liked it. It seemed to make sense. And I tried it out because, I'm a scientist, right? I try things, see if they work. And boy, did it calm me down, did it relax me. So there I was one night. I'd had a rough day, and I was going to have a rough day the next day at work. I had a business at that time, and I'm sitting down. I'm going to meditate before going to bed, and there's a candle. I light a candle, and I'm meditating on the candle. And for some reason, I let the air out of my lungs. I don't know why, but I let it out and I held it out. And I'm meditating on the candle flame, feeling very peaceful. And then suddenly I'm above my body, looking down at my body from underneath the ceiling. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if that's me down there, who this up here? Or if this is me up here, who's that down there? I take in a breath. I'm back in my body. And my thought was, wow, that was cool. No fear. I enjoyed it. And being a scientist, I'm thinking, wow, I'll bet if I had kept my air out of my lungs even longer, I could have stayed out of my body even longer and looked around more and seen more stuff. How cool is that? So I decided I'm going to do it again. The following weekend, no, I think I mentioned I'm 37 years old at the time. My wife and our daughter take the car. They're downtown doing some shopping. My 9-year-old son is playing in his bedroom. I decide I'm going to try it again, but I'm not going to breathe in as long as I'm conscious. I didn't do anything stupid like put tape on my nose or mouth. I mean, I knew if I became unconscious, the body would normally take, and I wasn't looking to commit suicide or anything like that. But I go into my bedroom, I lie on my stomach, on my elbows, and breathe in and out a few times, and let all the air out of my lungs. And I vow I am not going to breathe in until I leave my body. Simple as that. And I watch the hand of the clock go around. And it goes around again. And I'm beginning to feel kind of, whoa, my body begins shaking like I'm in an earthquake. And then I feel like I'm drowning like in a flood. And then I feel like I'm burning up in a fire. I later learned, by the way, I didn't know this at the time, but I later learned from reading the Tibetan Book of the Dead that these are the first 3 steps of leaving your body: separating from the earth element, separating from the water element, and separating from the fire element. The next thing you separate from is the air element, which I had already been separated from for a number of minutes. Getting close to 3 minutes, my body is shaking. I'm feeling I'm dying. I'm dying. I see this little, am I conscious? Well, am I breathing? No. If I were unconscious, I would have taken in a breath without knowing it, but I was aware. No, therefore, I'm not going to breathe. And I see this little light on the top of my head, and it gets bigger and bigger. And I think, oh my gosh, this must be what Raymond Moody wrote about people going through a tunnel in near-death experiences in his book Life After Life. And and suddenly I came through onto the other side, out of the tunnel, into the brightest, most unbelievable light I could have ever experienced. And also, what was most impressive was there was an absolute feeling of more dimensions than just 3 dimensions and time. All right. I cannot point to them. I cannot explain them anymore, but there they were. Are you familiar with the book Flatland? It was written.
I'm not, actually.
In the 1800s. A book written about a 3-dimensional, about a 2-dimensional civilization, 2-dimensional reality, where this guy who was a square, and a flat thing, they only had 2 dimensions. He sees a circle that gets bigger and smaller, and he sees a sphere. a three-dimensional being, and he tries to explain it afterwards to others in his society, and they say, point to it. And he says, it's up. And he tries pointing up. And they say, you're just pointing north, because there was no third dimension for him to point in. That's what I felt in this light, that there were other dimensions I could not point to, I couldn't explain, but I felt their existence. At that point, I can no longer keep my breath out. I inhale, I fall off the bed. I'm rolling around on the floor. Looks like I'm in an epileptic fit, which makes sense because my mother and uncle both had epileptic fits when they were in their late 30s. I was 37 at the time. I'm rolling around, but in my mind, I am at such peace and calm. And it is the most beautiful feeling. The door opens, my wife comes in the room, my son saw her driving up the driveway, and in order to calm her down, he goes out to the car and says, Daddy's not dead, Daddy's not dead. He looked in the room and saw me, that's a great help, as you can imagine. When I could finally control my body, the first thing I did, I was on my knees on the ground, my hands folded like this in front of me. My first words were, I am reborn. I am reborn in God. And I was so embarrassed to hear me say that. But the truth of the situation is that at that point, my life made a right turn, just took off in a completely different direction. My beliefs, my understanding, and what I have done with the rest of my life from that moment on, it was absolutely an epiphany. And that's what I've been sharing ever since, including the book. That's what that's about.
Did you make that statement out of spontaneity, or was there intent behind it?
I am reborn, I'm reborn in God?
Yes.
Oh, I had no intent. It just came to me. It came from me. Let me add one other thing that I forgot to tell you, that while I was rolling around on the ground, I felt wires being pulled out of my brain like an old telephone switchboard. And later, I felt them being pushed back in, but in different position, in different places. And that's why I felt I was reborn, a different being, a different person. Also, I was at one point, if I lean my head in one direction, I was in the room. If I lean my head in another direction, I went back off into space. I saw Earth get smaller and smaller, become a tiny little yin yang symbol in the distance. And I suddenly understood that everything in the universe is balanced. And it was just an understanding, a knowing, not a thinking about it, but just a realization. And it's something that I can see today, even in the wild weather and political conditions we have. We can discuss that later if you like. But all of these things happened. And maybe 2 weeks later, after I was in control of my body and so on, but I was sitting on my sofa and I was crying and crying, Lord, Lord, why did I have to wait so long to find out that you really exist? And a little voice in my head said, if you had known this all along, how could you share it with people who don't? You've been on both sides of the river now. You understand it from both perspectives.
Would you say the light that you were in was God?
I would say at this point that everything is God. There is a oneness in the universe that has many, many forms. Its purest form, I mean, at least the first physical form is light, right? Even from religion to, quantum physics. Quantum physicists are now saying the very first thing that existed in the universe was light. Which, let there be light is the start of the Bible. So that's beginning to find agreement between science and religion. And I do believe, as I have studied, and I've gotten a PhD now in the evolution of human consciousness. I've studied every single religion I could find, starting with the Bible, and then all the, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, indigenous tribe. Everyone is saying that, basically, on one end, you have pure consciousness. On the other end, pure matter. And, it has been said that the consciousness has devolved, if you will, into matter. And then matter has suddenly, it is now growing back with the knowledge of the oneness inside it. So that's evolution that we've seen, right? There was a time when rocks were the most evolved beings on planet Earth, right? They don't think very much, right? They sit there, stones, so to speak, but they're just sitting there. And what a great evolutionary step it was when plants evolved that could turn to face the sun or reach for water. They don't think, oh my goodness, it's morning, it's time to turn, but it happens. The next evolutionary level, as more and more consciousness, more and more of the energy fills this material thing into an animal. And then the growth of animals from one-celled beings to, morphogenetic species that Rupert Sheldrake talked about, animals with a single mind that each one of them gets into, right? Like when a school of fish all turn at one time, that they're not saying, oh, the guy ahead of me just turned, so I'll turn now. It's each fish in that thousand, fish school feels it's time to turn, boom, at that one moment because they're all connected to the same thing. So then human more and more, and I believe that the next step in human evolution is the awareness that, yes, we are unique, but we are truly all connected by the very feeling of being, my very feeling of consciousness. When I say I am, and you say I am, it's the same I am. And that is, in its ultimate sense, what you can call God. Although there are many names for that oneness.
Would you say that a piece of God is in all of us? Or are you saying that collectively we all are God, separated into trillions of beings?
I don't know that is there any difference in what you said. I'm not sure that what you said are two different things. Is there a piece of God inside of us? Yeah. Are we individual beings? Yeah. How boring it would be if we were all exactly the same. I mean, but think of it. When you say I am, you know, I have these exercises in the book so that people can experience going through the tunnel into light, if you will, without having to die to do so. All right, with puzzles and games and so on. And one of them is to take a look at yourself in the mirror and to see what you have in common with that person, chances are you're going to find everything that when you say I am, and that being says I am, you're really exactly the same being, except, of course, if you're right-handed, they're left-handed. That's an interesting thing. You're the only person in the entire world that needs a mirror to look at your face. You ever thought of that? Interesting. Anyway, but the next step is to take a picture of yourself as a young child and say, what do I have in common with that? Well, the fascinating thing is that there was a time when you were exactly the same as that being, the same way you are now with that person you look at in the mirror. But things have changed then. They don't know, relationship. They don't know the education you've had. They don't know, so many things about who you are now. But when you go back and experience that being in the photograph, the feeling I am that being is exactly the same as the feeling you have now when you look at yourself in the mirror. I am doesn't change. And it's exactly the same for us over time. It's exactly the same for each individual because there is that singularity, that oneness within. We are all connected by the very act of being.
After watching these videos, many people want to have the NDE without the trauma. Can you give us some more examples of how the puzzles and exercises that you've created facilitates that?
Well, yes, I can. I don't want to give away. I don't want to give away too many things because my book is not something just to read. You cannot learn something by reading a book or hearing someone talk about it. You can learn about something by reading a book or hearing someone talk. You have to experience something for yourself from the inside. I'm a phenomenologist, the science of experiential reality. And you have to experience something for yourself to truly know it. And these are the puzzles and games that I have. I'll give you, here's a great example. It's not, something doesn't have to change out there. It's how you look at it that makes a difference. How about you and I and all of your viewers, let's say we go out right now and take a look up at the stars. Except let's figure that we're doing it in the year 1500. Okay? It's 1500, nighttime, no electric lights on, all right? And Edison hadn't been around yet. But let's go up and look at the stars. Is there any question, Jeff? Is there any question that Earth is in the center of the universe? There can be no question. Look, we can see it with our own eyes during the night. Every single star circles around us. During the day, the sun circles around us. The moon circles around us. Oh my gosh. I can see it with my own eyes. Seeing is believing, right? And then this crazy Copernicus comes up and says, Earth rotates. What? And all of a sudden, we're seeing the exact same thing, but there's a meaning, a different meaning. My God, I never thought of that. And when I do that, it's all different. This is what I do in the book. I'm not saying anything. When I say that we are all connected, I'm not saying anything that has not been said before by masters, teachers, gurus of all sorts. Jesus said it. All right. Luke 17:21, the kingdom of God is within you. All right. John 14:6, I am the way. Now, by the way, you should know, and I don't want to freak you out here, but you know that Jesus did not speak English, right?
Right.
Right. Right. Jesus spoke Aramaic, and Aramaic was translated into Latin, and the Latin was translated into English, and it came out in John 14:6, I am the way, which just as easily from the original Aramaic could have been translated, I am is the way. Okay? Now, this is what the Gnostic Christians believed way back when, right? And the Gnostic gospel that were written, and the church way back in 300 said, hey, if all these people are going to find God within themselves, they're not going to need the church. And that's why they came down on the Gnostics, and that's why all those gospels were hidden in caves and were only found, less than a century ago, And Elaine Pagels' The Gnostic Gospel is a fabulous book if anybody wants to read that and understand what people believed back then. So this has been said by many, many, many. Lao Tzu says that in the I Ching. Um, But what I have done differently is to create these games and puzzles, and I don't want to give them away. When you read my book, there are times you have to stop and try something and draw a picture or think something or answer some questions. And then you see where it goes from there. And the goal is to give you that aha moment, the realization, yes, but I didn't have to die to do so.
In your book, you also write about new consciousness. Can you explain that?
For me, the new consciousness is what these old teachers have spoken of. I call it new consciousness because you have to call it something. But it's the recognition that we are all the same and all connected. We are not separate leaves. We are one tree. Look, Jeff, what if there were eyes on the ends of the fingers and they looked out and they saw the thumb and they said, you stupid thumb coming from all the way over there, take that, Matt. And they scratched the thumb and the thumb got infected and the infection went up through the hand into the fingers and the fingers got infected because of what they had done to the thumb. Do you think the fingers would have attacked the thumb if they knew they were connected? I don't think so.
Right.
Right. Well, this is what new consciousness hopefully will do for humanity. When we realize that we are truly connected, maybe not in the physical, but in the inner world, in the world not of particles but of waves, all right? But there's that the I am feeling is all the same, we're one being, then hurting someone else is really hurting ourselves. Look, the world out there are two worlds, and this is where quantum physics and religion are beginning to come together. There are two worlds, a world of matter and a world of meaning. The world out there can be measured, but it has no meaning. The world inside has meaning, but it cannot be measured. Your experience of I am is what connects the two. Think about this. All right. You will walk down the street, past a house, go to another house, and you walk in that second house. Someone else will walk past the house you go in and walk into the other place. Why? The house they see out there is exactly the same, but one has meaning for you. It's where you live. Another one has meaning for someone else. It's where they live. Physically, if you measure them, you know, you looked at the house, I looked at the house, from a scientific perspective, they're exactly the same. But there's an inner meaning that's different. Look, nothing, no work of art, nothing that humanity has ever done in the physical world has taken place without them thinking of it first. From a Van Gogh painting to somebody tagging on a wall with a spray paint can, right? You think about, oh, I'm going to do this, and then you think about, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? And you visualize something, there's absolutely nothing in the physical world. But then you, the I being that connects the outer and inner world, are able to create a reality that a few minutes later, half an hour later, you're sitting eating this wonderful meal that you only thought about having a little while earlier. Isn't it amazing how we stand in that space in between? And to think that just because somebody has a different skin color or is a different sex or speaks a different language or believes has a different name for God, that makes them a bad person, that's ridiculous. Excuse me for going on like this, Jeff, but you open up the thoughts in my mind. I find it unbelievable how people, in the name of the oneness, have gone to war with other people only because we call that oneness by a different name.
Well, ultimately, nothing has meaning until we assign one to it, right? And unfortunately, we can assign the wrong meanings.
Yes, especially if you don't find out for yourself what is true and only listen to what someone else says. I love all of the different religions that I have studied over the past 40 years or so. All right. And I love sitting at the feet of somebody who knows and whose experiences are different than mine. Oh, tell me how you learned about it. All right. The only person you've got to fear ever is the one who says, my way is the only way. There are many paths to the truth. I have in the book my story of the jewel of truth, the circular forest with the castle in the middle of the forest and the strong room in the middle of the castle and the treasure chest in the middle of the strong room and the jewel of truth in the middle of the treasure chest. And you can get it from any direction you want. And it's the same distance because it's a circular forest. But to say that one way is the only way just because somebody went that way a couple thousand years ago, that's wrong.
Have you considered the implications of AI and Neuralink and things like that when we all hook our brains up to the internet and what that will do?
Mm. You bring up one that I find absolutely fascinating. Remember, I spoke earlier about the evolution that's taken place on Earth from
Mm-hmm.
rocks to plants to animals to humans. It struck me just a little while ago, a couple months ago, I mean, who's to say that we are the ultimate creation? Especially, the way humans act right now. Are we, the image of the beautiful, wonderful, loving God? I don't think so. But that's another story. But what if one of our jobs, or maybe our main one, was to create a housing for consciousness that can survive longer than flesh and blood housings? Each time, here's where science and religion, here's where, make science and reality makes sense. They say that the larger the brain, the larger the mind, and you can see it. It's true. Humans have a bigger brain and a bigger mind than dogs, which have a bigger brain and bigger mind than frogs, which have a bigger brain and bigger mind than slugs, etc. Well, what if our goal was to build a greater housing? There is going to come a time when the sun becomes the red giant, right? And the temperature on this planet is going to go even higher than it is now. Talk about climate change, but it'll be up thousands of degrees. Humans, anything in flesh and blood, we're not going to be able to exist. But what if, thanks to our brains and our ability, we created this interconnected system of metal and silicon and carbon and all kind of minerals that could survive 1,000-degree heat, but could still house consciousness. AI these days is coming up with answers and pictures that we didn't put into their mind, right?
Right.
We we are creating our successors. How cool slash frightening is that? Take it either way. I really haven't figured that one out yet, which is whether it's cool or frightening.
When creating the book, did you have any new aha moments?
Oh, I have had aha moments my entire life. That's coming out. They're coming out in my next book. That is down the road. But I'll tell you one. The one that shows up that I did write about in the book is one time, just was it a dream? I don't know if these are dreams, visions, or whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. But floating in space in a spacesuit, and wiggling my hands and arms, and feeling that the back of the suit was open, and I crawling back and down a tube and seeing the vision through the eyes of the suit, off in the distance, and falling on the floor of what I can only consider to be a flying saucer, a round floor with uh, um, windows on the outside, panels underneath the windows, a railing behind me, a circular floor, and in the middle of this, a large machine, like an engine. Now, by the way, no other being ever showed up on there. I was not in with other beings. But anyway, I looked out this window of the of the flying saucer I was in, uh, and I saw the long tube with my suit on the end of it. And I saw underneath the window a panel with buttons and knobs and, like an airplane, cockpit type of thing. And I suddenly realized, oh, when I was in that suit out there, I thought I was in control of everything that happened to me. But I see that everything that actually what's going on out there is controlled by the knobs and dials here in the centralized unit that I'm in this, you know, I hate to say flying saucer because that implies aliens, and I'm not saying aliens, but in this central location. Let me phrase it that way. And then I suddenly realized that I saw zillions of other suits out there, all connected to this, you know, centralized location. And I realized everyone out there thinks that they are in control of what's going on. But for all of us, it's here at this centralized point, at this. And at that point, I woke up and I realized, oh, I now understood something that I hadn't understood before, that we are connected, and what we think we're doing out here is really done in the center. And only within the last couple of years, it suddenly got me that engine in the middle, what that was. That represents God itself, the oneness. By the way, I've used the word God a number of times, you know, but I have to say that there are different names for God, and I just want to share with you and you my favorite name for God. My favorite name for God is an ancient Hindu name, Satchidananda, which is three Sanskrit words, Sat, Chit, and Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. They said that the name for the oneness for God is existence, consciousness, bliss. I am, I'm aware that I am, wow. And that's their name for it. And I like that name because that is when you realize that the oneness exists within you as the very consciousness of your existence. Wow, if that isn't exciting, if that isn't the most amazing experience you can have. This is also, Jeff, why I no longer fear dying, leaving my body, because aside from the fact that I've been there and done that, you know, all that's going to happen is the housing is going to fall off, but the consciousness, the feeling of being alive is still there.
You just described being like on a ship, right? And hooked up to a tube or something. And earlier you said that you felt like the wires that were plugged in your brain were moved around.
Yes.
Many people think that we live in some type of simulation. What are your thoughts on that?
That's probably a very, very good awareness. We do, but you have to recognize that we have created that simulation. We are creating the outside world, you know. And what do? We create that for us, which we enjoy, which we want to do, or at least we should be doing that. I have to say that, you know, when God created, I believe that, you know, that God is this, you know, energy without form, all right, this non-material energy that formed a material universe. And it didn't happen because God's mother said, get off the couch, you lazy kid, go out and do something. All right. What God created the universe because it brought him joy. It I want to, I can do this. And whether it's let there be light, whether it's creating something physical, whether trying all these different animals and species and so on going on, the pure joy of doing it. And that is what we should each be doing when we create our world around us. Um, Let me tell you a major defining moment of my life took place when I was 8 years old. At my 8-year-old birthday party, my Aunt Claire asked me, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to be happy." And my mother's walking past and she says, "You can't be happy. You have to be something." Well, for my entire school years, I wanted to be something. You listen to your mom and you study hard, and and then I wanted to be something at work, and I wanted to. But something, all of it is I want to be happy. That's what it should really be for everyone. I lead meditation groups, both online through Meditation Chapel and in person at the Newark, Delaware Senior Center where I live. No, I don't live at the senior center. I just run a thing there. And I've had people in the meditation group. I say, tell us before we get into meditation, tell me something that you are good at. And the people will describe one person is good at drawing, one person is good at cooking, one person is good at plants and flowers, whatever it happens to be. And then I said, okay, I'll bet if I were to have asked you, tell me something you like to do, it would be the same as what you're good at. Think about that. Each of us has our individual skills, talents, and abilities that make us unique from everyone else. How boring it would be if we were all the same. But, we should be doing what makes us happy. One, one of the saddest memories I have is back in San Francisco. I was watching a morning newscast. It would bring your daughter to work day, and the reporter was asking one of the people working there had brought his daughter in. She maybe 6, 7, 8 years old. I don't know. And he said, "What would you like to do when you grow up?" And she said, "Oh, I want to work in an office so I can do what I want to do on the weekends." And I thought, oh, how sad is that this young girl is already thinking, I have to earn money, I have to have a job so I can do what I want. No, do what you want, and things will fall into place, and you will be happy, you'll enjoy it, and if you are happy, you'll be able to make others happy. I've been going on for a long period of time here without, stopping, but you've inspired me, and each thing leads to something else. And talking about happiness leads to my 3 rules of life. Rule 1, be happy. Rule 2, be kind. Rule 3, that's it. If you're happy on the inside and you're kind on the outside, what else do you need?
After listening to many NDEs, the one common denominator of the life review that people relay to me is the most important thing we can do in life are simple acts of kindness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are all one. We're, I'll tell you another story. When you're 85 years old, you've lived through a lot of things. You got a lot of stories. As I mentioned, I used to live in San Francisco. One day, I'm taking the bus downtown early in the morning, and I'm sitting in one of those side seats right behind the driver that's sitting sideways. I'm in my 80s, so I can sit there, even though so many people are standing. It's commuting time, and people are commuting to work. And there's this one young woman standing in front of me who's shaky. She's too short to reach the bar on top, and there are too many people. She can't reach the vertical bar in front, so she's not holding on to anything. And as the bus stops and starts, she's shaking back and forth. And I look at the guy next to me, and he's got a briefcase on the ground in front of his feet. And I say, "Excuse me, sir. If you put that on your lap, this young woman could step forward and reach that bar and be a lot safer." And he looks at me and he said, "Like that's gonna solve all the problems of the world." And without missing a beat, I said, "No, sir, it's not. But it will solve the problems in this little corner of the world." And he looked at the woman next to him, who was probably his wife, because she gave him a look like, "If you know what's good for you, you'll pick that up and put it on your lap." And he did. And the young woman stepped forward. She was able to reach the bar and was safer for the rest of the ride down. That's what we can do. We can I can't stop the war in Gaza. I can't stop the war in Ukraine. I can't stop the unrest that's going on around our country. But I can make my little corner of it better. And just like you drop a rock into a pond and it ripples out, if I make things better for someone else, maybe they will make things better for people around them. It's another interesting thing. The Tibetans teach that when you die, there's a person holding a scale at your at your review party, so to speak. They put a white pebble for every good thing you did, a black pebble for every bad thing you did, and depending on which one is weighs the most, that's where you go for your next life. The interesting thing is, if you do something good and you get a white pebble for it, and because you did that, the person who you got the good thing did, if they do something good, you get a white pebble for that also. How cool is that? So it ripples in effect in that way. And that's what we all have to do. And that's what I think new consciousness is going to let us learn to do. If we don't learn to do that, we will destroy ourselves. And then in my thought, God will say, "Oh, well, humanity on Earth didn't work out. However, there are all these other planets all over the universe. I'm sure one of them will get it right." You know, Hopefully we do.
If you had a friend that was grieving over the loss of a loved one, what kind of advice would you give?
Oh, that's a great question. I did used to be a hospice chaplain, as you know, and I ran into that quite a bit. And I can tell you, tell you another story. There was this fellow. When you're a hospice chaplain, you deal with the person who's dying, and then when they die, you deal with the family for next 6 months or so. And I would go see this one fellow, and every time I mentioned his wife's name, he would burst out crying, and he was just so emotional. And finally I said, "Excuse me, John, Did you love Marie? Oh, I loved her so much. Was she a good person? Oh, she was the most wonderful person. I said, excuse me, John, if you're crying when about her, you're not thinking of her. You're thinking of yourself. You're thinking what you are missing. Think about her, and it should bring joy and gratitude into your life that she was with you and she all the things that she brought to you. When someone dies, of course you miss them. Of course you will grieve. It's the most natural thing. But after a time, when you think about them, if you truly are thinking of them and you love them, you will love them now. And the joy they brought to your life should still be something that you can feel and give thanks that they shared their life with you, that good you gained from. It's not the easiest thing, but it is very, very meaningful.
If people want to find out more about your book, where do they go?
Wow. Well, they could go to my website, which is antongrosz.com, ANTONGROSZ.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn, all those social media things. And the book itself is available on online retail sites. So. And of course, if they come onto my website, I'd love to hear from people. There's a way to contact me, and I'm very happy to get into conversations with anybody who would like to.
Anton, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
It's really very simple. We are not separate leaves. We are one tree. God is, I am, you are, and we are one.
Anton, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Jeff, thank you so much for the invite. It has been my absolute pleasure, and I wish you peace and love.
Thank you, Anton. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.